Has this ever happened to you? You gave someone your whole heart, your loyalty, your softness, and somewhere along the way, they changed, not with rage, not with cruelty at first, but subtly, silently, like a flickering light growing dimmer each night until one day, the warmth was gone, and you were left in the cold, staring into the eyes of someone you once loved, now unrecognizable. They didn't begin as monsters. No one does. The monsters we meet in adulthood are often born in the shadows of innocence. A soft boy who wasn't allowed to cry. A tender girl who was told her feelings were too much. A kind soul punished for being too open. When a child is shamed for their softness, when their boundaries are broken before they can build them, they learn not to trust the world. Or wise, they learn not to trust themselves. And so, the mask begins. The ego, ever the protector, weaves a story. If I am too good, I will be destroyed. If I am too giving, I will be used. If I am soft, I will not survive. And with each repetition, the psyche twists, not out of malice, but out of necessity. The once innocent becomes calculating. The gentle one becomes guarded. The truth is buried beneath sarcasm, manipulation, control. This is the beginning of the shadow self, the part of us that Jung said contains everything we refuse to see in ourselves. Not just our rage, but our unmet needs, our longing, our fragility. The parts we disown don't disappear. They fester, they mutate, and eventually, they leak through passive aggression, through obsession with control, through sudden explosions we'll later blame on stress. But here's the truth no one wants to admit. Most monsters don't know they've become one. They still believe they're good people. After all, they hold doors open, pay their bills, work hard. But what they cannot see, or refuse to see, is the emotional trail of destruction they leave behind. The lover they manipulated, the friend they ghosted, the child they emotionally abandoned while providing everything else. Good people become monsters not because they are evil, but because they have been wounded. And wise, they were never taught how to feel that wound. So instead, they defend it, protect it, at any cost. And if you're not careful, you'll do the same. You'll call it strength, your refusal to feel, your need to control, your armor of detachment. But behind that strength is fear, a primal fear, the kind that whispers, if they really see me, they'll leave. So you hide, you posture, you push away what you secretly crave most: intimacy, softness, real connection. You will meet people in your life who are masters at hiding their brokenness beneath charm, who wear smiles like armor and weaponize kindness to get what they want. They are not evil, but they are dangerous. Because a person who cannot see their own pain is a person who will unconsciously project it onto you. They will gaslight you, not because they're calculating liars, but because they've spent a lifetime gaslighting themselves. They will manipulate, not because they are heartless, but because vulnerability feels like death to someone who was never allowed to be fragile. These are not villains in a fairy tale. They are the walking wounded. They do not need your pity, but they do demand your discernment. Because no matter how much compassion you have, no matter how much love you offer, if someone refuses to meet their shadow, they will eventually drag you into it. And that's how the cycle begins again. Two people, both unhealed, clinging to the illusion of connection while slowly bleeding each other dry. One playing the victim, the other the savior. One begging to be seen, the other afraid of being seen. Both projecting, both afraid, both wearing masks. This is not love. This is trauma bonding dressed in romantic language. And unless one, or both, chooses the painful, often lonely path of self-examination, this bond becomes a breeding ground for monsters. The kind that smile in public, but scream behind closed doors. The kind that say, "I love you," while secretly resenting your freedom. The kind that slowly erode your confidence under the guise of just being honest. And here's the cruelest part. They don't always know they're doing it. Because if you've never been taught how to confront your own demons, you will spend your life projecting them onto others, blaming, accusing, controlling, resenting, never realizing that the enemy you're fighting isn't out there. it's within. The war is internal, and so is the salvation. They say time heals, but time alone doesn't cleanse the wound. It conceals it. And what's buried isn't gone. It waits. It festers. It grows teeth. The man who once spoke to you with softness may now weaponize silence. The woman who once clung to you with devotion may now withdraw with icy precision. You wonder, what happened to them? But the better question is, what happened in them? When good people become monsters, it's rarely a switch flipped overnight. It's a slow erosion, a decay of self-worth, a lifetime of unmet emotional needs, stacked like bricks until a wall is formed, not around their heart, but between them and their true self. This is the psyche's last resort, the false self. Carl Jung warned of it. The persona we craft for the world. The good guy, the nice girl, the high achiever, the selfless partner. These identities are often praised, but when built on fear, not essence, they are prisons dressed as virtue. The man who is always good may secretly simmer with suppressed rage. The woman who is endlessly nurturing may secretly resent being invisible. These hidden emotions do not dissolve just because we deny them. In fact, they only grow stronger in the dark. And eventually they lash out, not always with fists, sometimes with indifference, sometimes with guilt, sometimes with charm so manipulative it feels like love until you realize you're bleeding. And if you're the one on the receiving end, you will doubt yourself. That's part of the spell. You'll question your memory. You'll excuse their cruelty. You'll replay the good times like a drug, convincing yourself it was real, that you just need to get back to that version of them. But here's the bitter truth. That version never existed in fullness. It was a fragment, a mask, a fleeting glimpse of who they wanted to be, not who they were capable of sustaining. Because to love sustainably, one must be whole. And wholeness requires shadow work. The deep, unglamorous process of turning inward, of facing your shame, your envy, your rage, your fear of abandonment, your impulse to control, your longing to be adored. All of it. Most people will never do this work. Not because they're weak, but because the world rewards a mask. It's easier to blame, to distract, to jump from partner to partner than it is to sit alone with your inner emptiness and ask, what did I lose myself? And yet, this is the only way out of the cycle. Until the shadow is faced, it controls you. And in relationships, that control shows up as passive aggression, emotional withdrawal, codependence, addiction to approval, or an unconscious need to dominate. Some call it just the way I am. But it's not. It's the way you've been conditioned by trauma, by culture, by survival. But what you've learned, you can unlearn. Still, the transition from good person to monster often occurs because someone refuses that unlearning. They get comfortable in a mask. They find power in control. They feel safe in their emotional detachment. Vulnerability begins to feel like exposure. So they harden. They weaponize intellect. They mock sentiment. They rationalize every cruelty with logic. And slowly, they lose access to the very thing that makes us human: empathy. If you've seen this in someone you loved, it's not your fault. You didn't create the monster. You simply stayed too long hoping they'd slay it. But monsters cannot be saved by love alone. They must choose to confront themselves, to grieve who they were told to be, to meet the parts of them that ache for validation, not with shame, but with compassion. The man who manipulates does so because control feels safer than intimacy. The woman who stonewalls does so because shutting down feels safer than being seen. Every monstrous behavior is a defense, albeit a damaging one. But you too must make a choice. You can't dance with someone's shadow and not get burned. You can't stay loyal to someone's potential while ignoring the reality of their actions. You can't call it love if it costs you your peace. This is where your work begins, not in saving them, but in saving yourself from becoming like them. Because the tragedy of staying too long in someone else's darkness is that it begins to dim your light. You normalize disrespect. You shrink your needs. You twist your voice into silence. And before you realize it, you are becoming someone unrecognizable, not to them, but to yourself. And that, too, is how a good person turns into a monster. Not through rage, but through erosion. There is a moment, quiet, haunting, when a mask slips. Not in violence, not in an explosion, but in a stillness so profound it terrifies you. You see their eyes, vacant, cold. You hear their words, calculated, hollow, and it dawns on you. This is not the person you once knew. Not because they've changed, but because you're finally seeing what was always there. Beneath the kindness, the manipulation. Beneath the charm, the control. Beneath the love, the deep, untreated wound. This is the unveiling of the unconscious. The monster does not rise from evil. It rises from neglect. Emotional, psychological, spiritual. It is born when the inner child is abandoned so many times it learns to protect itself with teeth, with claws, with silence, with shame. You can see in a man who punishes you with withdrawal when you speak your truth. Not because he wants to hurt you, but because he was never taught that emotional conflict can exist without danger. His nervous system learned early that disagreement meant rejection. So now, as a grown man, he ghosts, he punishes, he disappears, thinking he's preserving peace, when in truth, he's severing connection. You see in the woman who tests your loyalty with subtle cruelty, who pushes you away just to see if you'll stay, not because she's heartless, but because she learned that love leaves. And better to push someone away first than be left again. This is trauma in motion. Unseen, unspoken, unresolved. And until it is healed, it becomes identity. The ego clings to the mask, not out of pride, but out of terror. Because behind the false self is a gaping emptiness. The truth of being unloved, unchosen, unmet. So they become the very thing they feared. The abandoner, the betrayer, the destroyer. It is a tragic irony. The person who feared rejection becomes the one who causes it. The one who yearned for connection becomes a master of avoidance. The one who longed to be chosen becomes addicted to power over others, mistaking control for safety. And if you're not careful, you'll mirror them. This is the dangerous symmetry of relationships born from unresolved pain. One partner triggers the other's shadow, and the dance begins. What starts as desire becomes distortion. Love becomes leverage. Vulnerability becomes weaponry. You begin by falling in love with their potential, the sweetness, the depth, the spark. You convince yourself their wounds are just quirks. You excuse their detachment as needing space. You tell yourself they just need time. But slowly, you stop recognizing yourself. You smile less. You overthink more. You doubt your worth. You perform rather than express. And deep down, you know, you're not loved. You are tolerated, conditioned, controlled, and yet you stay. Why? Because part of you believes you can love them back into wholeness. That if you prove your loyalty enough times, they'll finally see your worth. That if you suffer just a little longer, the monster will remember the soft soul underneath. But monsters don't respond to devotion. They respond to boundaries. You must understand. The more you abandon yourself for someone else's comfort, the more you mirror the very shadow you're trying to save them from. You become the one who betrays you, the one who silences your voice, the one who gaslights your intuition. And in that moment, you too are transforming, not into a monster of violence, but of self-erasure. You think you're being patient, loving, empathic, but beneath it you're afraid. Afraid to walk away, afraid to disappoint, afraid that maybe if you leave, it means you were never enough. This is how good people become monsters, not through cruelty, but through self-abandonment. You were taught to endure, to make it work, to understand the other. But who taught you to understand yourself? Who taught you to listen when your body said no? When your soul said leave? Love is not martyrdom. Compassion without boundaries is self-destruction. Understanding someone's trauma does not require tolerating their abuse. Seeing the wounded child in someone does not mean you must stay and be their parent. You're not here to fix what someone else refuses to face. You're not here to teach emotional literacy to someone who weaponizes ignorance. You're not here to sacrifice your wholeness for someone else's fragments. You're here to evolve, And sometimes evolution requires shedding not just people, but versions of yourself that once believed love meant suffering. There comes a silence, not from peace, but from exhaustion. The kind that sinks into your bones after you've poured every ounce of yourself into someone who only gave you fragments in return. You lay awake at night, questioning whether the person you loved ever truly existed, or if they were just a mirror reflecting what you needed to see. This is where illusions die, and where truth begins. You see, the monster is not always the villain you imagine. Sometimes the monster wears your smile, your kindness, your voice, because the moment you begin betraying yourself to keep someone else whole, you become complicit in your own destruction. This is not your fault. It is your conditioning. You were taught, especially if you're a woman, that love means endurance. That being good means being forgiving. That your worth is proven in how much you're willing to tolerate. That if someone lashes out, shuts down, punishes you with silence, you must dig deeper into empathy because they're hurting. But what about you? Who protects the woman who is always protecting others? Who soothes the soul that is always being the safe place? Who holds the healer when her own heart is breaking? Too often, she is left alone, praised for her strength but punished for her needs, loved for her beauty but ignored for her boundaries, desired for her softness but shamed for her depth. And in that void, a fracture forms. She begins to question herself, becomes hypervigilant, shrinks her emotions to avoid conflict, edits her personality to remain lovable, and slowly, she transforms. No, she doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't scream, but her heart hardens. Her laughter fades. Her body carries a quiet tension, bracing for disappointment. She smiles, but it's polite. She listens, but not with presence. She touches, but only halfway, afraid to fully open because last time she did, it cost her everything. This, too, is a kind of monster. Not evil, but armored. Not cruel, but cold. She becomes the one who no longer trusts her own softness, who flinches at intimacy, who mistrusts kindness, suspects motives, questions even the real. She cannot tell the difference anymore between red flags and her own anxiety. That's what prolonged exposure to unhealed people does. It corrupts your compass. It twists your instincts. It makes survival feel like love. And you start choosing safety over connection, control over flow, distance over vulnerability. You might still be good, but you're no longer free. Because the monster is not just them. It is what awakens in you when your boundaries are constantly crossed, when your empathy is exploited, when your needs are invalidated, when your truth is silenced in favor of someone else's comfort. And if you're not careful, you'll start to believe the lie. Maybe I am too much. Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I deserve this. But hear this. You are not born to be anyone's emotional landfill. You are not born to be the soft place for someone who spits venom when they're wounded. You are not born to beg for the love you give so freely. You are born to be whole. And wholeness begins with truth. The truth that loving someone does not require losing yourself. That boundaries are not cruelty. They're clarity. That walking away is not giving up. It is choosing peace. There is power in detachment, not the kind born from bitterness, but from wisdom. The kind that says, I see your wounds, but I will not let them destroy me. The kind that says, I can love you from afar without sacrificing my own soul. The kind that says, I choose me. Because the woman who has tasted her own erasure and survived it becomes untouchable. Not because she no longer feels, but because she now sees. She sees manipulation wrapped in poetry. She sees emotional chaos hiding behind charm. She sees the boy pretending to be a man, the girl playing the role of lover while still seeking a savior. And she no longer plays small to make others comfortable. She no longer softens her boundaries to be liked. She no longer sacrifices truth for harmony. She no longer waits for a monster to turn back into a man. Because she knows monsters are not healed by love. They are healed by facing themselves. And that is a journey only the brave can make. There is a final breaking, not a collapse, but a release. Like a cocoon tearing open, not from force, but inevitability. After the storm of emotional betrayal, after the fog of confusion clears, after the mirror of self-reflection stops showing someone else's shadow and finally reveals your own, what remains is stillness. Not emptiness, stillness. And in that stillness, she breathes. The woman who has been shattered by love that looked like control. The man who was punished for showing tenderness. The soul that twisted itself into 1,000 shapes just to be wanted. They stop. They stop begging. They stop chasing. They stop explaining. Because the truth is no longer hidden beneath pain. It is illuminated by it. And here it is. Monsters don't just hurt others. They haunt the people who once tried to save them. But you are not here to be haunted. You are here to be whole. This is the reckoning. The moment where the cycle breaks. Not by screaming back. Not by revenge. But by reclaiming sovereignty. Not ego. Not arrogance. But divine detachment. You let them go. You let the memory go. The laughter. The kisses. The good days that kept you hooked. You let go of the idea that love means staying. That healing means waiting. That loyalty means silence. You let go, not out of indifference, but out of reverence for your own soul. And when you do, you meet the part of you that was always there, waiting. The one who no longer needs to prove her worth. The one who doesn't define herself by who chooses her. The one who can be soft and fierce, open and discerning. This is the rebirth, the return to center. The reclamation of power that was never truly lost, only forgotten beneath layers of self-denial. And it is here that freedom begins. Because when you've seen what you become in the presence of someone who cannot meet you, you start choosing differently. Not from fear, not from defense, but from depth. You don't seek intensity, you seek intimacy. You don't crave validation, you embody truth. You don't ask, will they choose me? You ask, do they see me clearly? You are no longer addicted to the highs of toxic love or the lows of emotional neglect. You have no desire to fix someone unwilling to fix themselves. You have no time for half-hearted connections or beautifully packaged pain. You become sovereign. And in that sovereignty, your standards evolve. The man who knows himself does not entertain chaos masters passion. The woman who honors her value does not tolerate inconsistency cloaked as freedom. The soul who has done the work does not fear solitude. They revere it. You no longer fear being alone. You fear losing yourself. And that fear keeps you grounded, not guarded. Open, but unshakable. Loving, but no longer leaking. Because the one who returns from the depths no longer chases shadows. She dances in her light. She knows healing is not a destination. It is a remembering. A peeling away of everything you thought you had to be loved. A slow return to the self, wild, wise, wounded, whole. She is not perfect. She is not untouched by pain. But she is awake. And with open eyes, she sees it all. The monster who once wore a human face. The lover who whispered promises with poison. The parts of herself that almost disappeared. And she blesses it. Because without that fire, she never would have risen. Without that betrayal, she never would have remembered who she was before the world taught her to forget. Without losing herself, she never would have come home. And now, she does not apologize for her truth. She does not beg to be seen. She does not fight for a seat at the table of someone who dines with their demons. She builds her own. Because the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.